We will call this meeting of the Eagle Subcommittee on Appropriations to order. I'd like to call on the clerk to take attendance.
Chair Hood.
Present.
Excuse me. Representative McKinney.
Here.
Representative Braybeck.
Here.
Representative Weiss.
Here.
Representative Martis.
Here.
Representative Beeson.
Here.
Representative Cavett.
Here.
Representative Schutte.
Here.
Madam Chair, all 8 subcommittee members are present.
Excellent, thank you. Without objection, absent members are excused. And I will request a motion from Representative Cavett to approve the minutes from the previous 2 meetings, March 19th and April 9th. Thank you, Representative Cavett. Can we call the vote? Oh, so moved. And next, we will have a presentation from former representative and current mayor of the City of Dearborn. Abdullah Hamoud is here to talk with us about his community's challenges around water infrastructure. Good to see you.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's great to see you all, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me. It's so great to not be in that room with you. Happy to be back in the City of Dearborn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you can see the presentation. Is it visible before you?
Yeah, looks great.
Awesome. Okay. And hopefully you guys have copies before you so you can look at the maps. But before I begin, I guess what I'll do is maybe give you some background on the City of Dearborn and kind of what we're experiencing from a stormwater infrastructure perspective. You know, we've had 3 floods over the last 10 years, 2014, 2017, 2021, ranging anywhere between a 50-year to a 500-year storm equivalent. The most recent, 2021, we saw a little over 7 inches of rain in 24 hours. And we have a stormwater infrastructure system built out for about 3 inches of rain for 24 hours. And if you recall the summer in 2021, Dearborn being the most downstream community alongside Detroit, there was actually high rain events in several days back to back. And I'll explain why that's important in a few slides coming up. But on the ground, what happened is in a city of roughly 32,000 homes, over 20,000 experienced basement flooding. Many of our streets obviously flooded, and you saw many of those images surfacing of semi-trucks stranded on highways and along major roadways, most of those roadways running through the City of Dearborn. And so that really takes away from the public health of our community. So one of the first things we did coming into office in 2022 was we executed a third-party assessment of our stormwater infrastructure system, and it's a 2-year study. And, you know, when Chairwoman Hood reached out asking if we can present, it's like perfect timing. We just got back our preliminary results, which I'll share with you, to give you an understanding of what does it take for a city of our size. We're the 7th largest city in the state of Michigan. We're the fastest growing city. We are a fairly old city, so we have old infrastructure. What it will cost us to help improve our stormwater infrastructure system to help prevent flooding to a certain capacity. The reality is this idea that never flood again is not a sentence we can use because there will always be a bigger storm. But I just wanted to give you that high level assessment before jumping in. On slide 3, this just gives you, if you're really into the nitty gritty details, this gives you a high level assessment of what our city's model looks like. We did a hydraulic model for about a year. We're able to capture and recreate what the flooding events of 2021 and 2014 storm would have looked like once we're able to build out this flow across our city. And just for orientation purposes, obviously, to the right of the image, we call the east end of the city. To the left of the image, we call the west end. Southfield Freeway is kind of that divider. And so what you'll find is, for those from Dearborn, everything east of Southfield is east, everything west of Southfield is west. That's kind of our dividing point here. And I'm an east sider, if you're wondering, and obviously the east side is the greatest side. This slide demonstrates what the root cause is for flooding across each region within our city. And I think what's the important takeaway is there's no one root cause that causes flooding within a city based on the stormwater infrastructure system that they have created. You see some of it is tied to capacity issues that you have in your major interceptors, and we'll get into that conversation. Your interceptors are your major lines that try to take water out of the neighborhoods and then down towards your outflows. We have some drainage issues as it pertains to the Rouge River. We have since done some major tree removal, log jam removal out of our Rouge River over the last year, about $1 million just in log jam removals. We had 53 log jams that we got removed. We have some flooding tied to the pump stations. So the pumps that you have that can push water out of the outflows need to be much larger. Some of them are gravity based. And so you're just praying to God that gravity is enough to push out these millions of gallons of water out at a timely fashion while your city's underwater. You have some flooding tied to the way that the pipes are configured because they were configured, over 100 years ago. And you obviously have some flooding tied to GLEWA. GLEWA obviously being the Great Lakes Water Authority, which is the authority that we deal with here in the city of Dearborn. And you see that more in the northeast corner and the southeast corner of our city. And then caissons. If you're unfamiliar with caissons are large storage tanks that we have here in the city of Dearborn. They can hold a few million gallons each. Fun fact, over the last 30 years, the city of Dearborn's already spent $500 million on stormwater infrastructure improvements. A chunk of this money was to build caissons, $120 million of which went on failed caissons. Caissons are a risky tactic that sometimes are used by cities to help capture stormwater out of the system. But we had a caisson that tilted and cracked under previous administrations, one that was begun to be constructed, but then it was built over a sulfur base, and so it got filled with sulfur water and rendered useless. And so you had $120 million lost out of the $500 million investment out the bat on risky investments that would have paid off if could have been executed. But just given the makeup of our soil here in the city of Dearborn, turned out it was nearly impossible. You see some of these challenges with cities that might be trying to build tunnels under their city. One case study to examine by this committee might be Hoboken, New Jersey. They've come a long way over the last 10 years. They've reduced flooding by about 80%. The only option they have left to get the remaining 20%, which would cost billions, is to build a tunnel across under the whole city to try to capture and reroute the water. So what we set out to do was basically anticipate, we have flooding events and rain events ranging between 50 years to 500-year events. What we wanted to do was try to improve our stormwater infrastructure system. As I stated earlier, we currently are able to capture about 3 inches in 24 hours. Based on what I'm about to share with you, we're plan and anticipate on making improvements that would get us to 4.55 inches of rain within 24 hours. That's a 50% increase in capacity of our current system. That's the equivalent to a 50-year, 24-hour event. And so this just highlights where we are now. But that's our goal. So this is under the current system. The blue dots that you see, this is basically where you'd experience street flooding across our city. All the teal dots are the neighborhoods that you'd experience basement flooding in the city. It's also important to highlight in 2021, the street flooding was so high that the water from the street got higher than the driveway and began to crash in through the basement windows of various houses. Although that's still technically classified as surface flooding, there is surface flooding that can lead to basement flooding. And obviously, see, you have a high level of surface flooding, a high level of basement flooding across the entirety of the city. From a city's perspective, and I hope the committee would agree, you always would prefer surface flooding over basement flooding. Having insurance on a vehicle is far easier than trying to get flood insurance on your home. In fact, only the southwest part of Dearborn, that's the bottom left of your map, is technically considered a floodplain. That is the only part of my city where you are legally allowed to purchase flood insurance. And no other part of the city, especially this northeast area where we did have a lot of basement flooding, you are not legally allowed to acquire flood insurance. These flood maps are actually dictated by the federal government and have not been updated in quite some decades. The only thing you can purchase is sewer backup, and sewer backup typically has a cap of $5,000 or $10,000. And if you had water that came in through your basement window and didn't necessarily come out of your sewer drain in your basement, you would not qualify for reimbursement from the insurance company. So there's obviously a lot of prohibitory measures that are in place from even an insurance perspective to try to make residents whole. So I want to give you in perspective what a storm system looks like when we're talking about millions of gallons of water. In a storm event, this is the equivalent of a 50-year storm. We're talking about 1,546 millions of gallons of water. That's a very big number. And this is what our system looks like now. So if this event were to happen in our city, this is what it would look like. In terms of the runoff, you have about 1 million gallons of runoff that will be absorbed by the green space across your city. It's important to highlight that if you have multiple days of rain without dry weather in between, the ground will get saturated and your runoff will be far less. You won't be able to capture this water within the green infrastructure that you have across your city. We had 483 millions of gallons that be captured by stormwater, 567 millions of gallons captured by our combined system. Our city is not completely separated. That is something that we're working towards. It gives you the variation of some is treated by KSAN, some is treated by the CSOs. But in the end, we're still stranded with about 200 million gallons of water across the city. And based on what we're able to pump out currently through GLIWA, the city would be underwater for between 2 and 3 days, just trying to pump out the excess water that we have that we were not able to capture through our stormwater infrastructure system or through any green space that we have in the city. Also understanding that we even have contractual obligations about how much water you can pump through a GLIWA system. We're having those conversations currently with GLIWA. But even if GLIWA were to give us unlimited ability to pump out as much water as possible, based on our outflows, the pumps that we currently have, we would not be able to pump out the water in a fairly significantly improved time. And so the city would still be underwater for several days, which increases the hazardous public health situation that you place residents in. Sometimes we talk about water in basements. If it's there for a few minutes and gone, it's less hazardous than having water there for days, because when we began our cleanup efforts in 2021, what began to sprung up was mold. And once mold takes hold across basements, across households, across the city, you're now displacing populations and families for far longer periods of time. So I'm going to explain to you the plan that we have put forth, and then I think the broader conversation, what does such a plan cost? What are some things that we're trying to explore, having conversations with the chair, with the federal government, things that can help improve local municipalities such as ourselves, local municipalities like the mini cities and townships that you all represent, what the same struggles that they're all facing. And so for us, these are the various 5 types of options that we have: sewer separation, conveyance improvements, pump improvements, green stormwater infrastructure, and then system rerouting. So in the city of Dearborn, areas that are boxed in that dark bluish purple color are currently partially or recently completed separations. The light blue areas are where we want to separate, and the areas boxed in black are the future areas we want to separate. As you can see, we have about 1,300 plus acres of sewer separation projects that still need to happen, and I'll give you what that proposed cost will look like. Sewer separation does a few things. First, if you do have backup into your home, at least it'll be stormwater and not the sanitation line. That is one major improvement. We had basements in 2021 where you had 8 feet of sewage back up into the homes, and so that meant you had to do full remodels and full restoration of the entire households and move that family out for a significant time period. And there are not resources to do this. If a family did not have the means, unfortunately, odds are they stayed in that house. They had mold that was festering, and we're trying to find grants and supports through nonprofit organizations to assist them with the restoration within their homes. But when you do separate a sewer, one, you build capacity. And secondly, you prevent the likelihood of sewage backing up into people's homes, which is a very strong positive. The second is conveyance. And so these interceptor lines, these are the major lines in which pulls water out of the neighborhoods and then down towards your pump stations or your outflows. This dark blue line that you see at the bottom left of the graph before you, this is the new stormwater interceptor that we want to construct. In total, amongst the 5 projects, we're looking at about $350 million in funding requests. The blue line alone, the new stormwater interceptor, is $150 million on its own. This stormwater interceptor will be roughly 12 feet in diameter. And so you can put full boats in there to explore the stormwater interceptor, but this is what's needed to capture water out of the neighborhoods to then fast track it down. This is one of the first bottlenecks that we identified in the study. And then additionally, you see the dark black lines are other pipe sizes that we have to increase the capacity of. And typically when you want to talk about 12-foot diameter pipes, you have to make sure this is obviously all the studies in theory technically until we move forward towards contracting, dig up the ground and understand the type of sand, clay, dirt that we have under the ground to determine what the likelihood is that we can actually insert such a size interceptor. If you can't do one 12-foot interceptor, maybe you're aiming at two 7-foot interceptors. I know that doesn't add to 12, but sometimes if you have smaller interceptors, you have to go to a larger size to capture the same level of water transfer and conveyance. The third is pump improvements. And so we have, as I spoke to earlier, sometimes the pumps that we have at the outflows are not enough. And so what you're looking for is kind of like generators that get installed at these pumps in order for you to begin to really push water out and into the river, into your various outflow areas, so you can clear the system quicker. This is something that can provide significant improvement. I know the county has a request on trying to improve the pumps across Wayne County. We as a city are obviously focused on the city of Dearborn, try to improve the pumping out. 4 is green stormwater infrastructure projects. So everything I've spoken to before this, we'd consider gray infrastructure projects. On the green stormwater, we have identified about 7 to 10 acres of parcels that we can transition to detention ponds, bioswales, that can pull water out of the system to fairly large sizes that can help alleviate the gray stormwater infrastructure system. So buying us increased capacity. But again, this comes down to, it's a double-edged sword. We're able to do this and we're going to do this. But if that green stormwater system you constructed becomes, if you have a lot of flooding that happens, and you don't have any dry period in between, it's saturated and it doesn't provide the same level of deterrence on flooding as it would in back-to-back stormwater events or rain events. And lastly is just some rerouting projects or easier configurations to make, basically creating a map of a maze of how to get the water out to the outflows in the quickest way possible. And so to the left, here's the image of what we currently have. And to the right, if we were able to accomplish this transformation of our stormwater infrastructure system, you see significantly less dark blue dots, significantly less teal dots. You'll notice, though, that there's still some present. If we wanted to go for a project that's more than building a stormwater infrastructure system for 50-year, 24-hour storm event, which is 4.5 inches in 24 hours, you're now talking in the billions of dollars. So we'll continue with sewer separation. We can continue with larger storm interceptors. But again, the only additional alternative after this would really be tunneling across the city of Dearborn. And you're really talking billions and billions of dollars for a high-risk project that we don't have strong success in. And no city that we have seen thus far has had strong success in across the country from our perspective. These are just a list of more projects that we can do. But I think what I wanted to present to you was this chart before you here. And so in the existing system as is, we'd have about 182 million gallons of water ending up in people's basements in a 50-year flooding storm event, which we obviously have significant basement flooding. 75% of basements flooded in 2021. And that was a 500-year storm. I didn't even want to get into that conversation. That was 7 inches of rain in 24 hours. We would not be able to handle that even with the new system. The level of flooding would just be decreased. After the first round of projects that I explained, we'd see a 17% reduction in basement flooding. That, for $300 million, you see a 17% reduction in basement flooding. And then we have projects 6, 7, and 8, which would cost another about $100 million, putting us at about $450 million. That can occur only when we do the first 5 projects. That gets us to a 74% reduction in basement flooding. And so you see that sometimes you have to lay down the initial storm interceptor line for $150 million. That then allows you to separate other neighborhoods, and that is what then reduces the likelihood of basement flooding across your city. You see that reduction in street flooding stays fairly flat. Our concern is not with street flooding. Again, we prefer streets to flood. Sometimes I have residents who complain saying if you just cleared the grates, water would go in the grates. I would almost hope as mayor, whenever there's a major flooding or major rain event, I hope all my grates are covered so that all the streets flood and the water doesn't get inside the system. Because that's how you can actually protect your residents, unfortunately. And so here's what I'll tell you from a municipal perspective. We're about to embark on a 10 to 15-year project somewhere north of $400 million. And that's assuming that, assuming the costs of today. We don't know what's going to happen due to inflation. We don't know what's going to happen due to the cost of construction. Obviously, 10 years from now, I imagine things will get more expensive. And so typically right now, when you begin to explore such projects, you do it with a 20% contingency. And then as you begin to execute the project, you lower that contingency down to 5 to 10%. Currently, the state offers the revolving fund. The revolving fund permits us to do a payback between 20 to 30 years at interest rates between 2% and 2.75%. If we were not able to receive any type of grant from the state, from the county, from the federal government, and we had to fully pay for this in our water and sewer bills, you're talking about a 50% rate hike on water bills for the next 3 decades across the city of Dearborn residents. That's not even taking into account the rate hikes that GLEWA anticipates to begin to come in come 2026, 2027, 2028. They anticipate 8% per year each year within those 3 years. And so it is very feasible that in the next, when we begin to embark on this 10 years, you're talking about almost 70, 80% increases on water bills and water and sewage bills across the entirety of the city of Dearborn. This is on your residents as well as on your corporate residents here in the city as well. And so it becomes extremely difficult to try to have these conversations, whether you're paying for it via property taxes, water and sewer bills, it's all the same thing. It's really a burden that gets placed on the taxpayers or an infrastructure system that I wish we had the appropriate allocations at the state to help us in drawing down these dollars. Secondly, what would have been great from our perspective, and I spoke with Eagle, and maybe I think there are some restrictions from the federal government, would have been at least to extend the payback period rather than paying back within 30 years as the maximum, to extend that out to 50 years or so. Because the reality is, I'm building I'm building a system to accommodate a 50-year storm within 24-hour period. By the time we finish this, who's to say what the new climate patterns are 15 years from now? But this is what we have to embark on. And the reality is, currently in our property tax bills today in Dearborn, we still have $4.5 million that are levied from the first infrastructure project for $500 million that partially separated portions of the city, constructed some caissons that assist, and obviously some projects that did not work out so well. Those don't come off the property taxes until 2030. So there's still 6 more years that you're paying for the first round of infrastructure improvements. So municipalities are really strapped. And we're looking to legislators such as yourselves to obviously, low interest loans are great. Any sort of principal forgiveness is even better. Any type of grants that you don't have to pay back are obviously much better. And as a city, we understand we're willing to come in with matching dollars. So if there's dollars that we can put up as a city that we can match from the county, we're having very strong conversations with our federal partners as well to assist us in really trying to tackle this issue. But it's an issue that all older cities and townships will have to reckon with if they're not reckoning with already, especially us here in Dearborn and neighboring Detroit. We're the last downstream communities. And so we can only do so much without the assistance of upstream communities. We're also trying to take water out of the system, providing us capacity then to push out more out of our outflow. I think with that, I'll conclude my remarks. It's a lot to digest. I'm not an engineer by trade. I feel like I am one now. But I'm happy to answer any questions with the permission of the chair.
We do have one question from Rep. Weiss.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for your presentation. I know you said the figure, but could you repeat it again, the dollar amount to do just the sewer separation portion of the project that you were discussing?
Strictly for the sewer separation?
Yeah.
So you have about $150 million for the storm interceptor. The sewer separation is about another $120 million for the first 700 acres. We'd need probably an additional $100 million on top of that once we get into the latter 700 acres.
Okay. And can you talk to just really briefly about, obviously, if you're doing any kind of road projects, are you able to, as you're kind of planning through and dispersing some of the money that you've been receiving and some various priorities that you have, particularly on those road projects, how you're prioritizing that leveraging some of those dollars to be able to also do sewer separation as you're tearing up roads at the same time?
Yeah, so you obviously layer in your Act 52 dollars with your water and sewer dollars in order for you to complete these types of projects. That's what we would be doing here. And we prioritize it. So, for example, where the stormwater interceptor would be going, technically was on the bill this year in order for that road to be replaced. We're actually postponing it now so that we can layer in the road improvements with the stormwater improvements so that we're only digging up the road once and not multiple times. So that is something that we're also timing appropriately with our engineering team.
That's great, thank you.
Following up on that, if you were not able to access federal or state funds for the water infrastructure components of your capital stack, will you be stalling progress on your roads projects?
Yes, the short answer is yes. I think more egregiously, we'd have to have an honest conversation with residents that at any point the likelihood of flooding could happen. One of the projects we took under through a pilot project over the last year, we actually placed meters across the entirety of the Rouge River as well as along all of our viaducts. And what we're able to do, what we're beginning to pilot is a alert system to residents, letting them know that once the Rouge River surpasses a certain height, that the anticipation of flooding is to happen within X period of time. And so we actually just had this community conversation yesterday to inform the residents that the system will go live. But these are the type of measures that we're also pursuing concurrently, that if we can't help prevent the flooding, we have to alert you when the flooding is going to happen. And that's not something that anybody wants to live with. People still have high anxiety each time we have a catastrophic rain event, anticipating that their basements will flood.
Thank you so much for your testimony. As a child of Southeast Michigan, I relate to that anxiety. Our home growing up in Royal Oak flooded on a regular basis. So I've lived with that, and it is not ideal and certainly a great concern for public health. We appreciate all of your insights and the picture that you've laid out in front of us about one community's struggle to access appropriate water infrastructure funding. What you're experiencing, of course, is repeated tens of times across Southeast Michigan and tens more times across the state. Adding up to a significant burden on ratepayers and taxpayers into the future. Thank you so much, and we hope to be in touch, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Much. And if you're looking for any city that you want to throw billions of dollars to for us to pilot it for the rest of the Michigan, Dearborn will happily volunteer itself to do so. Thank you.
We know you stand ready. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Well, now we would like to take up House Bill 5499 before the subcommittee. We will have a motion to adopt the substitute H2 and place House Bill 5499 before the subcommittee from Representative McKinney. So moved, and the House Fiscal team will do a roll call vote on that motion.
Question for the subcommittee is the adoption of substitute H2 for House Bill 5499. Chair Hood.
Yes.
Representative McKinney.
Yes.
Representative Braybeck.
Yes.
Representative Weiss.
Yes.
Representative Martis.
Yes.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cabot.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 8 yes votes. Substitute H2 for House Bill 5499 is adopted.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the HFA presentation from Austin Scott. While he's getting settled, I'll just make a point to note that Austin, as always, did a fantastic job helping us pull this together and even pushed some last-minute changes yesterday, helping us to deliver this to you on time. Thank you so much for that hard work.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Hood. Austin Scott, House Fiscal Agency.
I'm going to speak to the substitute H2 that was just adopted by the subcommittee this afternoon. This is for House Bill 5499, which would provide appropriations to the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy fiscal year that begins October 1st of this calendar year and concludes the 30th of September 2025. Looking at the gross funding that's included in the recently adopted substitute H2, the department would be funded at $1.1 billion for the fiscal year 24-25, of which $257.9 million is general fund. Those are both increases over current year, fiscal year 23-24. It's a gross increase of $22.6 million and a general fund increase of a shade under $12 million. Skipping down to the second half of page 1, I want to touch on some of these individually and some of them as groups, but they tell the story of those funding changes that are listed in the table at the top of page 1. Item number 1, the executive budget as published in February included a proposed increase in the landfill tipping fee to the tune of $80 million, and that would be restricted revenue that was intended to go towards the Renew Michigan Fund. That increase in revenue, that increase in tipping fee is not reflected in the substitute that was just adopted. And the corresponding FTE authorizations that would go with that $80 million increase of 36 FTEs are not included. There is an increase of 15 FTEs that were included in the executive budget that were not directly connected to the proposed increase in the tipping fee. Item number 2, this is match for federal lead line replacement funding. You'll see is $50 million gross, of which, 20% is GF, $10 million is GF, 80% is restricted funding, that's $40 million in restricted funding, and that comes from the Make It in Michigan Competitiveness Fund, which is intended to be able to access federal funding for the state of Michigan. Item numbers 3 and 4, I'll touch on together. These are both one-time appropriations. Item 3, clean fuel and charging infrastructure is $15 million one-time GF. Item number 4, clean fleets, this is $10 million in one-time GF. What these have in common is they're both appropriations that are all GF. They're appropriated on a one-time basis. They are both related to clean infrastructure initiatives. Item number 3 is specific to fuel and charging infrastructure, as is noted there. And item number 4 is a grant program that makes monies available to local governments and transit authorities and others who maintain a transportation fleet for those entities to transfer that transportation fleet to a clean fleet. Flipping forward to page 2, looking at the top of page 2, item number 5, what you'll see in the budget for Eagle both in current year, included in the subcommittee substitute for next year, and in recent years looking backward as well. Water state revolving funds, this is an appropriation that provides resources, most of which are loan resources, available to local governments for water infrastructure projects, for a variety of different types of water infrastructure projects, both clean water projects, drinking water projects, and non-drinking water projects, I should emphasize with clean water projects. You'll see in the House substitute includes $82 million gross, $82.2 million gross, a piece of which just over $20 million is federal, but the majority of which, over $60 million, is general fund, and that is specific and unique to the H2 substitute. Item number 6, the House concurred with the stormwater grants program as proposed in the executive budget. Item number 7, permitting outreach staff. There was proposal of $4.4 million and 26 FTE positions to expand the department's permitting capacity, both in personnel and funding for the purpose of issuing permits. The House substitute includes half of that request, so it's 13 FTE positions funded by $2.2 million GF. Item numbers 9 through 12 I'll take as a group, skipping down 9, 10, 11, and 12. Each of those 4 are concurrences between the House substitute recently adopted and the executive budget as presented in February. Another group I'll take is 13, 14, 15, and 16. Each of these items, 13, 14, 15, and 16, are all one-time appropriations. They're all funded by general fund, and they are all unique to the House substitute. Item 13 is $2.5 million general fund to begin a composting program, a composting acceleration program that will be available to local government statewide. Item 14 is a drinking water intake monitoring program. This is $1.5 million set aside for the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments for a drinking water intake monitoring program for the purpose of monitoring drinking water and guarding against hazards. Item 15, state employees retirement system implementation costs. This is $50 million to cover pension-related costs tied to certain bills that are under consideration now. This is not unique to Eagle. It is included in Eagle. It's also has been discussed for inclusion in other budgets as well, especially for departments like Eagle that have law enforcement personnel. And flipping over to page 3 and concluding part 1, I want to highlight item number 16, wetlands mapping. This is a new appropriation, new inclusion in the H2 substitute. This is $1 million of general fund, and this is for a wetlands mapping program that would help identify wetlands across the state and map those areas as well. You'll see the boilerplate sections that begin at the bottom of page 3 and continue on through pages 4, 5, and concluding on page 6. There are some boilerplate changes over current year. There are some as compared to the executive budget. I'll call your attention generally to page 5. Page 5 is where you'll find boilerplate sections for some of the one-time projects that I mentioned, both the clean fleets and clean fuel and charging infrastructure programs. You'll find those on page 5. You'll find some more boilerplate guidance for the composting program, for drinking water infrastructure, which I spoke to on the first page, and then continuing on through the balance of page 6, the drinking water intake monitoring program is highlighted in section 1005, information about stormwater grants earmark, and finally, wetland mapping in 1008. So each of those I call your attention to are specifically tied with one-time appropriations in part 1. And I'm happy to field questions at the chair's discretion.
Rep. Cavett has the first question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Well done. On number 15 there, the state employees retirement systems, could you give me that number again?
The dollar figure?
Yeah.
50,000 for Eagle, 50,000 GF.
I'm sorry, I thought you said 50 million.
I misspoke if I did. I apologize if I said that.
Just looking for clarification.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
That was a mistake on my part if I did not say 50,000.
All right, thank you.
No further question. Oh, sorry. One popping up to the right. Rep. Weiss.
This may be more for you, Chair. But can you speak to the, on page 2, the Water State Revolving Funds, line 5? You put a lot more resources in there than was it in the executive rec. Can you just talk a little bit about why you prioritize that area?
Yeah, absolutely. When the budget first arrived at my desk, given some stipulations, it was clear that we were in what I would call a full-blown water infrastructure crisis. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that point. In fact, I sit across both the Eagle budget and the Health and Human Services budget, and we were proposing early in the process to fund $60 million for water affordability, direct dollars to local ratepayers to help pay off debt, some of the debt that people accumulate when water rates escalate beyond affordability. We saw part of that story from Mayor Hammoud. So we were putting $60 million into water affordability, but we only had $40 million comparatively for actual water infrastructure investments. That was somewhat of a dystopian moment for me as the chair of Eagle, and a real clarion call about the need to work with the Appropriations Chair and with the administration to find additional dollars. We did, in fact, as it was described to me by one member of staff, comb the couch cushions, if you will, to discover $100 million in the budget to put into water infrastructure and some other components of the budget that were priorities. And I give a lot of props to Chairwoman Whitwer for that contribution. In addition to that, yesterday, we heard from Governor Whitmer and the Eagle team that $290 million was identified. These are the final pieces of the 2002 Clean Water Bond that voters approved 22 years ago now. So today we are, closing out that clean water bond, and what we are discovering in the fiscal year 2025 budget is that without an influx of federal cash, there is a gaping hole in water infrastructure. Eagle helped us to articulate that at minimum, we need $1 billion annually stat, ASAP, tomorrow, yesterday, for investment to help our local governments with revolving loans and opportunities to work on clean water and drinking water. I think that the state of Michigan could responsibly spend between $2 and $3 billion annually to achieve progress against the $19 billion and climbing rapidly cost of replacing and repairing the state's water infrastructure. These are huge, huge, monumental issues. Water is life. Water infrastructure dollars are crucial and foundational to supporting public health, safety, and our ability to do other infrastructure work, as Mayor Hammoud pointed out, like fixing the dam roads. Our state's future is inextricably dependent on solving this finance issue. And I really want to take this moment to thank everyone who came around the budget to make it not so dystopian and a little bit healthier, but also to really call on all of us as Michiganders, especially our elected leaders, to put partisanship aside and convene to deliver real, sustainable, scalable revenue solutions for our water infrastructure crisis in the years to come. This is the kind of big infrastructure investment that our great-grandparents and grandparents made for us. And when I talk with my constituents at doors, when I go out to other districts across the state, maybe it's because of who I am as a champion for water, but I think it's not. I think it's because of who Michiganders are as champions of water, that I regularly, frequently, almost always hear from people that they value clean water and they want to be a part of solving these solutions. I don't think we need to be afraid of this. We just need to step up and get creative. And I hope in my final months of service here to the state of Michigan that we will be able to identify and implement solutions and get us back on track as a state and as a people. Here we are in the midst of 20% of the world's fresh water. We must take care of it. So, okay, off my soapbox and back to business. We will have a motion to report HB 5499 H2 out of subcommittee with recommendation from Representative Braybeck. Oh, I'm sorry, we have amendments. Getting out of order. Pardon me. We have amendments, and Minority Vice Chair Beeson, would you like to speak to the First Amendment?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, my First Amendment, the the elimination of the staff, basically. I also love water. I live on the on the river too, but I'm looking at 26 FTEs, and as of last year, we still didn't fill 144 vacant spots, and I know that this year we only have 39. I know we put a bunch in last year, and I'm hoping to move my amendment.
Motion to adopt the amendment? And a roll call?
Question for the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 1, offered and moved by Representative Beeson. Chair Hood.
No.
Representative McKinney.
No.
Representative Braybeck.
No.
Representative Weiss.
No.
Representative Martis.
No.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cabot.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 no votes. Amendment 1 is not adopted.
Thank you. Representative Schutte has an amendment. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd first like to briefly speak to an amendment I'm not making. I do appreciate seeing the landfill tipping fees being removed from this budget. I think that would have been an unnecessary tax and expense on our public schools and our manufacturers and our employers, people across Michigan. So appreciate the chair's discretion on that. But on the amendment I am moving, I would like to make a move for a motion for a $50 million appropriation to the Four Lakes Task Force for dam restoration in Midland and Gladwin counties. You know, this is a vitally important critical infrastructure investment to restore the lakes and rebuild the dams in mid-Michigan following our devastating flood and catastrophic dam failure in 2020. We've literally seen images in this, during testimony in this committee on the damages this disaster caused in mid-Michigan in 2020. The images are striking. They made it on the front page of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. My hometown of Midland, its downtown was under 10 feet of water, and hundreds of families in the area, they literally saw their homes, their most valuable investments washed away. So Mid-Michigan is a resilient community. We responded with our characteristic grit and determination, but the cost of this rebuild and restoration is still falling significantly on those homeowners who were acutely damaged by this disaster. We know the importance of critical infrastructure, water infrastructure, dam safety. Sanford, Secord, Smallwood, Wixom Lakes, they're regional treasures. They're enjoyed by many in our state. So in this budget, I would hope we would find room for this important investment. I'd like to move my amendment.
Thank you for the motion. Roll call vote?
Question for the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 2, moved by Representative Schutte. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Braybeck.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cabot.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 2 is not adopted.
Representative Schutte introduces a third amendment. Would you like to speak to that amendment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Hood. So today I would like to move to appropriate $5 million for the Curtis Drain Project in Midland and Gladwin counties. This is an important drainage upgrade to the infrastructure of our counties. We heard again in our committee testimony that drain commissioners are not able to levy special assessments against property owned and managed by our state's Department of Natural Resources. Unfortunately, the Curtis Drain in Midland and Gladwin County is nearly entirely surrounded and encompassed by DNR property, and the special assessment cost of this project is then falling on just a few homeowners and property owners in a very economically disadvantaged part of the district. So this $5 million would ensure that the state picks up its share of the tab for a project that we will all benefit from. I'd like to move my amendment.
Thank you for your motion. We'll have a roll call vote.
Question for the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 3, moved by Representative Schutte. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Braybeck.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cavett.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 3 is not adopted.
Minority Vice Chair Beeson has an amendment. Would you like to speak to that amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. My next amendment is a removal of a couple of pillars in the Coquitlam River, which is currently letting 2,100 cubic yards of sediment go past every year, and it's always around the ice is our biggest problem, not just rains or floods, because it stops the ice flow every year, and it backs up, and that actually drains Saginaw Bay, Midland, and Gladwin, and it's been there for quite a while. It's an old bridge that they use now for the rail trail that goes from basically the thumb all the way through to, but you go around the spot. But every year, and there was actually a fatal boat accident on the no-wake zone, but it stops every year, and it's just because the way the river flows, and it's like makes it a 90. So we go and watch it every year and watch, and our current couple of locations, like a Castaways restaurant, it actually floods right up to them and puts castaways on the island, and we go stay there and wait till it goes down. And sometimes it takes about 6-8 hours or 12 hours. Some days it takes like 3 or 4 days, and it affects everybody that drains into that. There's 10 county drains that drain into this one river that has 2 pillars that are left there, and they did get funding to the township, and the court got funding to do the dredging, but not to remove the 2 pillars that are there. So that's all. That's my amendment. I asked to move it.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call vote on the amendment.
Question before the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 4, moved by Representative Beeson. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Brayback.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cavett.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 4 is not adopted.
Thank you. Minority Vice Chair Representative Beeson has an additional amendment that he'll speak to briefly.
Yes. Okay. Linwood Road access sewer installation is a little town where they're putting in, the DNR has a spot set up, and every time it rains, all the septics build up, and they're getting ready to put a little park at the end for 150 people that want to launch their canoe and kayaks, but every time it drains, the sewer comes up and goes into the system because it's all septic fields. Yes, that's the face. That's what it smells like. So I was hoping that maybe we could tie that into the septic that's there. That's all.
Thank you for your amendment. We'll have a roll call vote.
Question before the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 5, moved by Representative Beeson. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Brayback.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cavett.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 5 is not adopted.
Thank you. Our 6th amendment comes from Representative Cavett. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Black River in Alcona County is currently being dredged by the DNR 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a year. They've done a study where they concluded that adding a jetty at the mouth of the river would stop the sediment from filling up. There's safety issues here. There was a tragedy that happened out there a couple years ago, and boats weren't able to access the water. This is draining into the Great Lakes, into Lake Huron. Not able to access the water. It hurts the community. It's expensive for the DNR. If we put in the jetty, we could stop the dredging, and I appreciate you move this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for the motion. We'll have a roll call vote.
Question for the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 6, moved by Representative Cavett. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Brayback.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cavett.
Yes.
Representative Schutte.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 6 is not adopted.
And our final amendment, also from Representative Cavett. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick here, but in summary of these, real quick, this amendment will continue Cooperative Lakes monitoring program. It will dedicate funding for dam safety programs and permit an extra 2 FTEs. It will spell out the allowable use for the use of refined petroleum fund dollars for leaking underground storage tanks remediation. It will also reimburse the refined petroleum fund to $70 million that was borrowed during the Granholm administration. It has never been paid back. It will provide administrative costs for sites cleanup, remediation, and it also will make sure that Eagle does not promulgate rules that would disproportionately economically harm small businesses. Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask that you move this amendment. Please.
Thank you, Rep. We'll have a roll call vote.
Question before the subcommittee is the adoption of Amendment 7, moved by Representative Cavett. Chair Hood.
Pass.
Representative McKinney.
Pass.
Representative Braybeck.
Pass.
Representative Weiss.
Pass.
Representative Martis.
Pass.
Representative Beeson.
Yes.
Representative Cavett.
Yes.
Representative Schuette.
Yes.
Madam Chair, there are 3 yes votes, 5 passes. Amendment 7 is not adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Now, we will have a motion from Vice Chair McKinney to report HB 5499, H2, out of subcommittee with recommendation. Can we have a roll call vote?
Question before the subcommittee is reporting substitute H2 for House Bill 5499 to House Appropriations Committee. Chair Hood.
Yes.
Representative McKinney.
Yes.
Representative Braybeck.
Yes.
Representative Weiss.
Yes.
Representative Martis.
Yes.
Representative Beeson.
Pass.
Representative Cavett.
Pass.
Representative Schuette.
Pass.
Madam Chair, there are 5 yes votes, 3 passes. Substitute H2 for House Bill 5499 is reported to the House Appropriations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, for your great work. Thank you, team, for your votes and support of this budget. There being no further budget to come before the subcommittee, the meeting is now adjourned.